Up to this point, we've covered two major domains: urban forest management and arboricultural practices. We've also explored communication and public engagement. Now we're moving into the final domain: administration, policy, and planning. Because managing trees at the city scale requires more than fieldwork and communication. It requires structure, organization, and governance. Let's start with a key idea. Urban forestry is a program, not just a collection of activities. And like any program, it needs leadership, coordination, and systems to function effectively. Administration is what makes that possible. Now let's talk about what administration includes. It involves managing staff, budgets, operations, and program goals. It includes setting priorities, allocating resources, and ensuring that work is completed effectively. Administration connects strategy to execution. Now let's consider policy. Policy defines the rules and guidelines that shape how urban forestry is implemented. As we discussed earlier, this includes tree ordinances, development regulations, and management policies. Policy ensures consistency and accountability. Now let's talk about planning. Planning defines long-term direction. It sets goals and identifies strategies to achieve them. Administration, policy, and planning are closely connected. Planning defines what should happen. Policy defines how it must happen. Administration ensures that it does happen. Now let's consider scale. At the individual tree level, arborists make decisions about pruning, planting, and care. At the program level, administrators make decisions about budgets, staffing, and priorities. This shift in scale is important. Now let's talk about coordination. Urban forestry programs often involve multiple departments: public works, parks and recreation, planning departments, utilities. Coordination between these groups is essential. Without it, efforts can become fragmented. Now let's consider leadership. Effective programs require leadership. Leaders set direction, communicate goals, and guide decision-making. They also represent the program to stakeholders and decision-makers. Now let's talk about accountability. Programs must demonstrate that they are using resources effectively. This includes tracking performance, reporting outcomes, and adjusting strategies as needed. Now let's connect this to earlier topics. Everything we've covered, planting, pruning, communication, planning, depends on effective administration. Without it, even well-designed programs can fail. Now let's consider the role of urban forestry professionals. As professionals advance in their careers, their roles often expand beyond technical work. They become involved in program management, policy development, and planning. Understanding administration is essential for these roles. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional exam, focus on program structure. You should understand the role of administration in urban forestry, the relationship between policy and planning, how programs are organized and managed, and the importance of coordination and leadership. Questions may involve identifying how programs function at a systems level. Administration is the backbone of urban forestry. It turns ideas into organized action, and it ensures that programs are effective, efficient, and sustainable. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring organizational structures and how urban forestry programs are designed within cities and agencies. In the previous podcast, we introduced the role of administration and how urban forestry functions as a coordinated program. Today, we're going to look at how those programs are actually organized. Organizational structure. Because the way a program is structured influences how decisions are made, how work is carried out, and how effective the program can be. Let's start with a key idea. There is no single model for organizing urban forestry programs. Different cities structure their programs in different ways, but all structures must support the same goal: managing the urban forest effectively. Now let's talk about common organizational models. One of the most common is placement within a Parks and Recreation department. In this model, urban forestry is managed alongside parks, green spaces, and recreation programs. This can support coordination in managing public landscapes. Another common model is placement within public works. In this structure, urban forestry is connected to infrastructure management. This includes streets, sidewalks, and utilities. This can be beneficial for managing street trees and infrastructure conflicts. Now let's consider planning, or environmental departments. Some cities place urban forestry within sustainability, or environmental divisions. This connects tree management to climate goals, environmental planning, and policy development. Now let's talk about hybrid models. In many cities, responsibilities are shared across departments. For example, parks departments may manage park trees. Public works may manage street trees. Planning departments may handle policy and development review. This can provide specialization, but it also requires coordination. Now let's consider centralized versus decentralized structures. In a centralized structure, one department is responsible for most urban forestry activities. This can improve consistency and coordination. In a decentralized structure, responsibilities are distributed across multiple departments. This can provide flexibility, but may lead to fragmentation if not well coordinated. Now let's talk about roles within programs. Urban forestry programs typically include a range of roles. Program managers oversee operations and strategy. Arborists perform technical work, such as inspections and maintenance. Field crews carry out planting, pruning, and removal. Administrative staff support budgeting, scheduling, and reporting. Now let's consider communication within organizations. Effective communication between departments is essential. For example, if a planning department approves a development project, urban forestry staff must be involved to ensure tree protection. Now let's talk about decision-making. Organizational structure influences who makes decisions and how quickly those decisions are made. Clear roles and responsibilities improve efficiency. Now let's connect this to program effectiveness. Well-designed structures support coordination, accountability, and efficiency. Poorly designed structures can lead to confusion, duplication of effort, or gaps in management. Now let's connect this to professional roles. Urban forestry professionals must understand how their program is structured. They need to know who to coordinate with and how decisions are made. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional exam, focus on organizational concepts. You should understand different ways urban forestry programs are structured, the difference between centralized and decentralized models, the roles within urban forestry programs, and the importance of coordination. Questions may involve identifying advantages and challenges of different structures. Organizational structure shapes how urban forestry programs operate. It determines how work is coordinated and how decisions are made. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring policy development and how urban forestry policies are created and implemented. In the previous podcast, we discussed organizational structures and how urban forestry programs are arranged within cities and agencies. Today, we're going to focus on how the rules that guide those programs are created. Policy development, because policies don't just appear. They are developed through a process that involves data, stakeholders, and decision-making. Understanding that process is essential for anyone working in urban forestry. Let's start with a key idea. Policy is intentional. It is designed to address specific goals or problems. In urban forestry, policies may be created to protect canopy, manage development impacts, or improve tree care practices. Now let's talk about where policy begins. Policy development often starts with identifying a need. For example, a city may be losing canopy due to development. There may be inconsistent tree care practices. Or there may be public concern about tree removal. These issues create the need for policy. Now let's consider data. As we discussed in earlier podcasts, data plays a critical role. Inventory data, canopy assessments, and program evaluations provide evidence. They help define the problem and support the need for action. Now let's talk about stakeholder input. Policy development involves multiple stakeholders. City departments, elected officials, community members, developers, and advocacy groups may all be involved. Engagement helps ensure that policies reflect a range of perspectives. Now let's consider drafting. Once a need is identified and input is gathered, policies are drafted. This involves defining requirements, procedures, and enforcement mechanisms. For example, a tree ordinance may specify when permits are required for removal. Now let's talk about review and approval. Policies typically go through a review process. This may involve legal review, public comment, and approval by governing bodies such as city councils. This process ensures that policies are appropriate and enforceable. Now let's consider implementation. Once adopted, policies must be implemented. This includes training staff, updating procedures, and communicating requirements to the public. Implementation is where policy becomes practice. Now let's talk about enforcement. As we discussed earlier, policies must be enforced to be effective. This may involve inspections, fines, or corrective actions. Enforcement ensures compliance. Now let's consider evaluation. Policies should be evaluated over time. Are they achieving their intended goals? Are adjustments needed? Evaluation helps improve policies. Now let's connect this to urban forestry. Policy development is how cities shape the future of their urban forest. It provides structure and direction. Now let's consider the role of professionals. Urban foresters and arborists often contribute to policy development. They provide technical expertise and help translate science into policy. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional exam, focus on policy development. You should understand how policies are created, the role of data and stakeholders, the steps from drafting to implementation, and the importance of enforcement and evaluation. Questions may involve identifying stages of policy development or evaluating policy effectiveness. Policy development is how ideas become action. It shapes how trees are protected, managed, and valued. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring program coordination and interdepartmental collaboration, and how different parts of a city work together to manage the urban forest. In the previous podcast, we discussed policy development and how urban forestry rules are created and implemented. Today, we're going to focus on how those policies and the broader urban forestry program are carried out across an entire city. Interdepartmental coordination. Because urban forestry does not exist within a single department. It intersects with many areas of city operations. And without coordination, even strong policies and plans can fall apart. Let's start with a key idea. Urban forestry is cross-functional. Trees interact with infrastructure, land use, utilities, and public space. That means multiple departments have a role in managing the urban forest. Now let's look at some of the key departments involved. Public Works often manages streets, sidewalks, and right-of-way trees. Parks and Recreation manages trees in parks and public green spaces. Planning departments oversee development and land use decisions. Utilities manage power lines and underground infrastructure. Environmental or sustainability departments may focus on climate and ecosystem services. Each of these departments has different priorities. Now let's talk about why coordination matters. Without coordination, decisions can conflict. For example, a planning department may approve a development project that impacts trees. If urban forestry staff are not involved, tree protection may be overlooked. Similarly, infrastructure projects may damage routes if coordination does not occur. Now let's consider communication. Regular communication between departments is essential. This may include meetings, shared data systems, and coordinated planning processes. Clear communication helps ensure that all departments are aware of urban forestry considerations. Now let's talk about roles and responsibilities. Each department must understand its role in urban forestry. Clear responsibilities reduce confusion and improve efficiency. Now let's consider shared goals. Coordination is easier when departments share common goals. For example, improving canopy cover, reducing heat, or enhancing public spaces. Aligning goals helps departments work together. Now let's talk about data sharing. As we discussed earlier, data is critical. Sharing inventory data, GIS maps, and planning information allows departments to make informed decisions. Now let's consider conflict. Different departments may have competing priorities. For example, infrastructure projects may prioritize efficiency and cost. Urban forestry may prioritize tree preservation. Coordination helps balance these priorities. Now let's talk about processes. Many cities develop formal processes for coordination. For example, requiring urban forestry review and development approvals, or integrating tree considerations into capital improvement projects. Now let's connect this to program effectiveness. Coordinated programs are more efficient and effective. They reduce duplication of effort and prevent conflicts. Now let's consider the role of professionals. Urban foresters often act as connectors. They work across departments to ensure that trees are considered in decisions. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on coordination concepts. You should understand which departments are involved in urban forestry, why coordination is necessary, how communication and data sharing support collaboration, and how coordination improves outcomes. Questions may involve identifying coordination strategies or resolving interdepartmental conflicts. Urban forestry is a team effort. It requires collaboration across departments and disciplines. And when that collaboration works, cities are better able to manage and sustain their urban forest. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring regulatory compliance and permitting processes, and how urban forestry programs ensure that rules are followed. In the previous podcast, we explored interdepartmental coordination and how different parts of a city work together to manage the urban forest. Today, we're going to focus on how rules are applied in practice. Regulatory compliance and permitting. Because policies only work if they are followed. And permitting is one of the primary tools used to ensure that compliance happens. Let's start with a key idea. Permitting is about oversight. It ensures that activities involving trees are reviewed before they occur. This helps prevent damage, loss of canopy, and unsafe practices. Now let's talk about what requires a permit. In many cities, permits are required for tree removal, especially for larger or protected trees. Major pruning, particularly on public trees, construction activities that may impact trees, and sometimes planting in public right-of-way. The specific requirements vary by city, but the purpose is consistent: to ensure that tree-related activities are evaluated and managed appropriately. Now let's consider the permitting process. It typically begins with an application. This may include information about the tree, the proposed activity, and the reason for the request. In some cases, supporting documentation such as site plans or arborist reports may be required. Now let's talk about review. Urban forestry staff review the application. They assess the condition of the tree, the potential impacts, and whether the proposed activity complies with regulations. This may involve site inspections. Now let's consider decision-making. Based on the review, the permit may be approved, denied, or approved with conditions. Conditions may include requirements such as replacement planting, protection measures, or specific pruning methods. Now let's talk about compliance. Once a permit is issued, the work must be carried out according to the approved conditions. Inspections may be conducted to ensure compliance. If violations occur, enforcement actions may be taken. Now let's consider enforcement. Enforcement may include fines, stop work orders, or requirements to correct violations. Effective enforcement ensures that regulations are taken seriously. Now let's talk about documentation. Permitting creates a record of tree-related activities. This information can be used for planning, tracking canopy changes, and evaluating program effectiveness. Now let's consider the role of professionals. Arborists often play a role in the permitting process. They may prepare reports, assess tree condition, or recommend management actions. Their expertise supports informed decision-making. Now let's connect this to urban forestry. Permitting helps balance development and tree protection. It ensures that trees are considered in decisions that affect the urban landscape. Now let's consider public interaction. Permitting processes often involve communication with applicants and the public. Clear guidance and transparency help improve compliance and reduce conflict. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on permitting concepts. You should understand why permits are required, what activities typically require permits, the steps in the permitting process, and how compliance is enforced. Questions may involve identifying appropriate permitting requirements or evaluating compliance scenarios. Permitting is how policy becomes action. It ensures that tree-related decisions are reviewed, documented, and managed responsibly. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring urban forestry program operations and how daily activities are organized and managed at the program level. In the previous podcast, we discussed regulatory compliance and permitting and how policies are applied in day-to-day decisions. Today, we're going to focus on how urban forestry programs function on a daily basis. Program operations, because while planning, policy, and funding set the framework, operations are where the work actually happens. Operations are the day-to-day activities that keep an urban forestry program running. Let's start with a key idea. Operations connect planning to action. They take long-term goals and turn them into daily tasks. Now let's talk about what operations include. Urban forestry operations typically involve tree planting, tree maintenance, such as pruning and watering, tree removal inspection, and monitoring, responding to service requests, and managing emergencies. Each of these activities must be coordinated and scheduled. Now let's consider workflow. Work often begins with data. As we discussed earlier, inventories and inspections identify needs. These needs are then translated into work orders. Work orders assign tasks to crews or contractors. Now let's talk about scheduling. Scheduling ensures that work is completed efficiently. This may involve grouping tasks by location, prioritizing high-risk work, and coordinating with other departments. Now let's consider staffing. Urban forestry programs rely on a combination of staff. Field crews perform hands-on work. Arborists provide technical expertise. Supervisors coordinate activities. Administrative staff handle scheduling, records, and communication. Now let's talk about contractors. Many cities use contractors to supplement their workforce. Contractors may be used for large-scale pruning, removals, or planting programs. Managing contractors requires oversight to ensure work meets standards. Now let's consider equipment. Operations require tools and equipment. As we discussed in earlier podcasts, maintaining equipment is part of operational management. Now let's talk about service requests. Urban forestry programs often receive requests from the public. These may include concerns about tree condition, requests for pruning, or reports of hazards. Managing these requests is an important part of operations. Now let's consider emergency response. As we discussed in podcast 54, storms and other events require rapid response. Operations must be flexible to address these situations. Now let's talk about coordination. Operations often involve coordination with other departments. For example, scheduling work around construction projects or utility maintenance. Now let's consider efficiency. Effective operations maximize the use of resources. This includes minimizing travel time, using crews effectively, and completing work in a timely manner. Now let's connect this to program success. Well-managed operations ensure that trees are maintained, risks are addressed, and goals are achieved. Poor operations can lead to delays, inefficiencies, and unmet objectives. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on operational concepts. You should understand how work is planned and scheduled, the role of staff and contractors, how service requests are managed, and how operations support program goals. Questions may involve identifying effective operational strategies or resolving workflow issues. Operations are the engine of urban forestry. They keep the program moving forward, and they ensure that plans and policies are translated into real-world outcomes. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring leadership and program management, and how urban forestry professionals guide and improve their programs over time. In the previous podcast, we explored urban forestry program operations and how daily activities are organized and carried out. Today we're going to focus on what guides those operations, leadership, and program management. Because even with strong plans, policies, and operations, a program still needs direction. It needs leadership. Let's start with a key idea. Leadership is about direction and influence. Program management is about organization and execution. Together, they determine how effective an urban forestry program will be. Now let's talk about leadership. Leaders in urban forestry set the vision. They define goals, communicate priorities, and guide decision-making. They also represent the program to stakeholders, city officials, and the public. Leadership is not just about authority. It is about building trust, motivating teams, and creating alignment. Now let's consider program management. Program management focuses on implementing that vision. It involves planning, organizing, and overseeing activities. This includes managing staff, budgets, schedules, and performance. Program managers ensure that work is completed efficiently and effectively. Now let's talk about decision-making. Leaders and managers make decisions about priorities. Which trees need immediate attention? How should resources be allocated? What strategies should be implemented? These decisions are based on data, experience, and program goals. Now let's consider communication. Effective leaders communicate clearly. They ensure that staff understand expectations and priorities. They also communicate with stakeholders and decision-makers. Now let's talk about team development. Urban forestry programs rely on skilled staff. Leaders support training, professional development, and knowledge sharing. This helps improve performance and build expertise. Now let's consider adaptability. Urban forestry is dynamic. Conditions change. New challenges emerge. Leaders must be able to adapt and adjust strategies. Now let's talk about accountability. Program managers track performance and ensure that goals are being met. They use data and evaluation to guide improvements. Now let's consider collaboration. As we discussed in earlier podcasts, urban forestry involves multiple departments and stakeholders. Leaders facilitate collaboration and coordination. Now let's connect this to program success. Strong leadership and management lead to more effective programs. They improve efficiency, enhance outcomes, and build support. Now let's consider the role of professionals. Urban forestry professionals often grow into leadership roles. Understanding leadership and management is essential for career development. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on leadership concepts. You should understand the difference between leadership and management, the role of decision-making and communication, the importance of team development, and how leadership supports program success. Questions may involve identifying effective leadership strategies or management practices. Leadership is what guides urban forestry programs forward. It connects vision to action, and it ensures that programs continue to grow and improve. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring program sustainability and long-term success, and how urban forestry programs maintain effectiveness over time. In the previous podcast, we discussed leadership and program management, and how direction and organization shape urban forestry programs. Today, we're going to focus on the long-term, program sustainability, because success in urban forestry is not measured in months or even years. It is measured in decades. Sustainability at the program level means maintaining effectiveness, funding, and support over time. It ensures that urban forestry efforts continue to deliver benefits well into the future. Let's start with a key idea. Sustainability is about continuity. It is about ensuring that programs do not just succeed temporarily, but remain strong over time. Now let's talk about what contributes to program sustainability. One of the most important factors is consistent funding. As we discussed earlier, funding supports planting, maintenance, staffing, and planning. Programs that rely on unstable or short-term funding may struggle to maintain continuity. Now let's consider institutional support. Urban forestry programs must be supported within the organizational structure of the city. This includes recognition of their importance by leadership and integration into city priorities. Now let's talk about policy. Strong policies provide a foundation for sustainability. Tree ordinances, planning requirements, and management standards ensure that urban forestry remains part of decision-making processes. Now let's consider staffing. Programs need trained and experienced personnel. Investing in staff development and retention supports long-term success. Now let's talk about public support. As we discussed in earlier podcasts, public understanding and engagement are critical. Programs with strong community support are more likely to receive funding and political backing. Now let's consider adaptability. Sustainable programs must be able to adapt to change. This includes changes in climate, development patterns, and community needs. Flexibility allows programs to respond to new challenges. Now let's talk about data and evaluation. Tracking performance helps programs identify strengths and weaknesses. This supports continuous improvement. Now let's consider partnerships. Collaborations with community groups, nonprofits, and other organizations can expand program capacity and support. Now let's connect this to long-term outcomes. Sustainable programs maintain canopy, manage risk, and deliver ecosystem services over time. They ensure that the urban forest continues to provide benefits. Now let's consider the risks to sustainability. Funding cuts, lack of coordination, and poor planning can weaken programs. Recognizing these risks helps prevent them. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on sustainability concepts. You should understand what contributes to program sustainability, the role of funding, policy, and staffing, the importance of adaptability, and how public support influences long-term success. Questions may involve identifying factors that strengthen or weaken programs. Program sustainability is about endurance. It is about building systems that last. And it is about ensuring that urban forestry continues to thrive over time. In the next podcast, we'll bring everything together and look at the complete system of urban forest management across all domains. In the previous podcast, we discussed program sustainability and how urban forestry programs maintain effectiveness over time. Today, we're going to step back and look at the entire system, because at this point, you've covered all 4 domains of urban forestry: urban forest management, arboricultural practices, communication, and public engagement administration, policy, and planning. Now the goal is to understand how they all connect. Let's start with a key idea. Urban forestry is a system, not a collection of separate topics. Each domain supports the others, and none of them can function effectively on their own. Now let's begin with urban forest management. This is the strategic foundation. It defines goals such as increasing canopy, improving diversity, and managing risk. It uses data, like inventories and canopy assessments, to guide decisions. But management alone does not implement change. That's where arboricultural practices come in. This domain is the operational side. It includes planting, pruning, soil management, risk assessment, and maintenance. These are the actions that shape the urban forest on the ground. Without these practices, management remains theoretical. Now let's consider communication and public engagement. This domain connects the program to people. It builds understanding, trust, and support. It includes education, stakeholder engagement, and advocacy. Without communication, even well-designed programs can face resistance. Now let's look at administration, policy, and planning. This domain provides structure. It includes program organization, policy development, funding, and long-term planning. It ensures that the program is coordinated, funded, and sustainable. Now let's talk about how these domains interact. Urban forest management sets the goals. Administration and planning organize how those goals will be achieved. Arboricultural practices implement the work. Communication and engagement build support and understanding. Each domain reinforces the others. Now let's consider an example. A city wants to increase canopy in underserved neighborhoods. Urban forest management identifies the need using data. Planning develops a strategy. Policy may require tree planting in new developments. Funding supports planting programs. Arborists plant and maintain the trees. Communication engages the community. This is the system in action. Now let's talk about feedback. As we discussed earlier, evaluation provides feedback. Programs track progress and adjust strategies. This creates a cycle of continuous improvement. Now let's consider scale. This system operates at multiple levels: individual trees, neighborhoods, entire cities. Decisions at one level affect outcomes at others. Now let's connect this to professional roles. Urban forestry professionals must understand all parts of the system. Even if they specialize in one area, they need to see the bigger picture. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on integration. You should understand how the 4 domains connect, the role of each domain, and how they support overall program success. Questions may involve identifying how different components interact. Urban forestry is not just about trees. It is about systems, people, and long-term stewardship. And understanding how all the pieces fit together is what defines a true urban forest professional. In the next podcast, we'll conclude the entire series and reflect on what it means to manage and care for the urban forest. Over the course of this series, we've covered the full scope of urban forestry, from understanding what an urban forest is, to measuring it, designing it, and managing it, from the technical practices of arboriculture to the human dimensions of communication and policy. And now, we arrive at the final question. What does it actually mean to be an urban forest professional? Let's start with a key idea. An urban forest professional is not defined by a single skill. They are defined by integration. They understand how trees function as living systems, and how those systems interact with cities, infrastructure, and people. They are both technical and strategic. They understand tree biology, soil, water, structure, but they also understand planning, policy, communication, and community dynamics. Now let's talk about perspective. An arborist may focus on an individual tree. But an urban forest professional sees the entire system. They think about populations, canopy distribution, species diversity, age structure, and long-term trends. They are always asking, what will this forest look like in 20 years? In 50 years? Now let's consider responsibility. Urban forests provide critical benefits. They reduce heat, improve air quality, manage stormwater, support public health, and enhance quality of life. Managing these benefits is a responsibility. Decisions made today affect future generations. Now let's talk about decision-making. Urban forest professionals make decisions every day. Where to plant, what to plant, when to prune, when to remove, how to balance safety with preservation, how to allocate limited resources. These decisions require both knowledge and judgment. Now let's consider communication. As we've discussed, technical knowledge alone is not enough. Urban forest professionals must communicate. They explain decisions, engage stakeholders, resolve conflicts, and advocate for the urban forest. Now let's talk about adaptability. Urban environments are constantly changing. Climate conditions shift. Development patterns evolve. New challenges emerge. Urban forest professionals must adapt. They must continue learning and adjusting their strategies. Now let's consider collaboration. Urban forestry is a team effort. It involves multiple departments, organizations, and community members. Professionals must work across disciplines. Now let's connect this to leadership. Even those who are not in formal leadership roles influence outcomes through their work, their communication, and their decisions. Now let's bring everything together. Urban forest professionals operate at the intersection of science, management, and community. They care for living systems within complex urban environments. And they do so with a long-term perspective. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional exam, this final concept is integration. You should understand how all domains connect, the role of the professional in applying that knowledge, and the importance of long-term thinking. The exam is not just about memorizing facts. It is about understanding how those facts come together in real-world decision-making. The urban forest is not static. It is constantly growing, changing, and responding. And managing it is an ongoing process, one that requires knowledge, skill, judgment, and care. Because in the end, urban forestry is about stewardship. It is about managing a living system that we did not inherit from the past, but are borrowing from the future. And now, you are part of that responsibility. You've now worked through the full progression of urban forestry, 80 podcasts, 4 domains, dozens of concepts. But here's the reality. Passing the exam, and more importantly, applying this knowledge in the real world, is not about remembering isolated facts. It's about integration. So today, we're going to shift from learning to mastery. Let's start with the most important idea of this entire series. Urban forestry is a system. Every question on the exam and every decision in the field comes back to this. Not just, what is this concept? But, how does this concept connect to everything else? Now let's walk through that system one more time. Domain 1, Urban Forest Management. This is your foundation. You should be able to think like a program manager, not just a tree worker. You understand canopy, inventories, GIS, species diversity, age distribution, and ecosystem services. If you see a question about canopy gaps, uneven age structure, over-reliance on one species, you should immediately think, this is a system imbalance problem. And the solution will involve planning, diversity, and long-term management. Domain 2, Arboricultural Practices. This is where decisions hit the ground. You should be able to think like an arborist. You understand. Planting, establishment, pruning, risks soil roots, pests removal. If you see a question about a declining tree, a structural defect, a planting failure, you should think, what stage of the tree life cycle am I in? And what is the most appropriate intervention? Domain 3, Communication and Public Engagement. This is where many people struggle on the exam, because the answers are not always technical. They are human. You should understand stakeholders' conflict, public perception, education communication strategies. If you see a question about a resident complaint, public opposition, a controversial removal, the correct answer is often not the most technical one. It's the one that includes clear communication, listening, transparency. Domain 4, Administration, Policy, and Planning. This is the system-level thinking domain. You should understand program structure, policy development, funding, planning, coordination. If you see a question about program goals, budget decisions, policy implementation, you should think, how does this decision affect the entire program? The most important exam skill? Let's simplify everything into one rule. Always zoom out. When you read a question, ask, what level is this question operating at? Tree level? Population level? Program level? Community level? Most wrong answers come from choosing the right concept at the wrong level. Common exam traps. Here are patterns to watch for. Choosing removal too quickly, forgetting long-term impacts, ignoring stakeholder considerations, overlooking species diversity, focusing on short-term fixes instead of system solutions. How to think like a top candidate. Top candidates don't memorize. They recognize patterns. They connect ideas. They think in systems. When you see a question, your brain should move like this. What is the problem? What domain does it belong to? What is the root cause? What is the best long-term solution? At this point, you're no longer just studying. You're thinking like an urban forest professional. You understand that. Trees are infrastructure. Management is long-term. Decisions have ripple effects. People are part of the system. This is the transition point. From learning to applying. From information to judgment. And from student to professional. Because the goal was never just to pass an exam. It was to understand how to care for a living system that exists inside one of the most complex environments we've ever created. The city. And now, you're ready to manage it. You've been listening to the Arborist-podcast. Our goal is to grow our collective knowledge, one domain at a time. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to help us keep this momentum. Until next time, let's keep growing this community together.